Welcome, viewers. I think in today's session, we want to look at issues pertaining to separation management. To say there are different kind of separations that tend to happen within an organization. So, an employee could be employed, and after working for some years, there can be some form of separation between the employee and the employer. So, this kind of separation they tend to take different forms. For example, could be related to death, could be resignation, could be termination with notice, could be dismissal, or even sometimes retrenchment, redundancies, and also sometimes an employee can go missing. So in all those kind of scenarios, there is always a procedure on how what kind of benefits have to be paid to either the employee or even the dependents. I'll give an example. For example, an employee has died, or maybe has died through a normal death. Maybe he was sick and yeah, it happens that he has died, and also maybe sometimes there was an accident, so he happens to have died, for example. So in all those kind of scenarios, there are different payments that have to be made. So in this context, in this particular presentation, what I'm going to focus on is to look at to say, okay, what is payable when, for example, when someone has died. So could it be first thing, wages for the days worked, for example, have to be paid. For example, someone has died on the 15th, maybe so salary from the 1st to the 14th has to be paid to the employee. And also sometimes some employers tend to provide something like an amount that is in maybe as form of compensation. For example, 2 months salary. There are other death policies which maybe employer can also put his own and employees own, and also maybe condolence money and all that. Yeah, but what we need to appreciate within the law, there is an element of wages for the days worked, but also you're supposed to pay the outstanding leave days to the dependents, for example. So equivalent of the outstanding leave days, because the death has led to the employer not being able to complete his or her leave days. But also there's need for pension contribution. This is how much was accumulated in his employer owner and also employee account, including the bonuses. They have to be paid to the dependents, and this have to be divided as per the nomination forms which are there that the employer had declared, to say these are the people who have to get my benefits, for example. And also the life assurance aspect, to say maybe the 1 times annual salary, the 2 times annual salary, the 3 times, depending on the policy of the organization. So that level, it has also to be paid to the dependents. And also at the same time could be paid gratuity if it was within the law. If it was in the contract, for example, can also be paid. And also at the same time, issues like if the employer was not did not put his employees on pension, for example, can also be required to pay penalty for not pressing. So it could be a penalty, and also pension contributions plus penalty, and also the interest that I have accumulated to the account, for example. Yeah. So, but what we need to know is that whenever an employee has died, the employer is not under any obligation required by law to provide support to the employer. His disease relations, for example, issues pertaining to coffin, transport. But all those three things are done in light of the terms and conditions of service that the employer has, and also sometimes out of benevolence or goodwill. So unfortunately, we don't have such kind of arrangements within our laws in Malawi. And also what we need to appreciate at the same time is also maybe an employee might the same death, but it could be related to an accident, for example. So apart from whatever I've mentioned under the death that the employer has to provide, the employer is also supposed to provide the workers' compensation that is under the death, and even the group personal accident, if there is a group personal accident, for example, under the Workers' Compensation Act. So apart from whatever the death benefits that are applicable, but also there should be workers' compensation related to the death of that particular employee. So maybe it could be a driver, for example, has died on an accident, or maybe someone has died after an accident within the workplace. So we should be able to provide such kind of such kind of a thing to the deceased relations. Yeah, so that's what is very, very important to appreciate. And also sometimes there could be also another form of separation whereby an employee can resign from the organization. So when an employee has resigned from an organization, it's always important that the employer has to provide, the employee has to provide a notice to the employee, depending on what notice was agreed. It could be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and the employer is supposed to pay wages for the days worked in that particular month. If, for example, he's serving a notice and all that, yeah, but also leave pay for outstanding leave days, assuming that these have not accumulated over the years, but in the current financial year, because the law is clear that the leave days of previous year cannot accumulate to the next 6 months of the other year. So the pension funds have to be transferred to another employer that the employee has, or maybe the employee can have access to the pension funds after 3 months. That is amendment or the law as it is in 2023 under the Pension Act. You can have access if he has to prove that he's not working after 3 months, then he can be able to access the pension fund. So that's what is very, very, very important. But maybe what I need to also emphasize on this one is to say sometimes you might find that an employer has resigned and maybe has got some outstanding leave days. For argument's sake, you are supposed to provide a notice of 1 month, and you're also having some outstanding leave days. For example, you have to 22 working days as your annual leave, which is equivalent to 1 month notice, but also you have to save 1 month notice as you are resigning. So some employees would say, no, I'm applying for leave for 1 month. Whilst on leave, I'll be saving notice. So we should be able to know that that's not required, that's not allowed within the law, because you look at that as double dipping. Or sometimes I can say, maybe if I'm to make a reference to accounting, for example, you have debit and credit, for example. So you, as an employee, you are supposed to pay the employer. You're supposed to debit your account by paying the employer the notice, and the employer is also supposed to credit your account, which is like to credit your account, which is like now it's trying to pay your leave days. So these things can offset each other. So what it means is when they have offsetted, you are sacrificing your leave days for the sake of not giving you for you not to give the notice to the employer. So when you have done that, at the end of the day, what we need to appreciate is you are supposed to leave the same day that you have communicated that, to say I'm leaving today, but not like after a month then I'll leave, but you're expecting that to be paid after a month. No, you're supposed to leave immediately, because the leave days have offset with the notice which we are supposed to provide to the employer. So these are some of the things which we need to be mindful whenever there is a need for us to understand these things. And also at the same time, we should also be able to whether there is gratuity as per a contract or conditions of service, then the employer is supposed to pay that. And also there are some moments whereby employer can decide to terminate the services with a notice. Yeah, so when the employer, maybe there's a minor misconduct and all that, yeah, so they are here supposed to provide for the days worked, wages for the days worked, leave pay for the outstanding leave days, the notice pay as required in the terms and conditions of service. Pensions have to be transferred to the next employer, or maybe you can be accessed after the 3 months. Gratuity could be paid, and also in some cases surveillance pay if it's retrenchment. If the termination is related to retrenchment, then you are supposed to pay retrenchment. You are supposed to pay surveillance, and also at the same time repatriation cost. For example, you are working in Blantyre, then but before coming to Blantyre, you are in a long way. They're supposed to pay you repatriation to where they got you from. Yeah. So apart from that, there's also another form of separation which we call the summary dismissal. Yeah. This is whereby maybe the employee has been involved in a major misconduct and he has to leave the organization. through a summary dismissal. So when there's summary dismissal, the employer is supposed to pay wages for the days worked, but also the pension transfers, they're not being tampered. They have to be transferred to the next employer, or they have to be accessed after the 3 months, as we already discussed. And also at the same time, whenever there is the leave pay has to be paid, and also gratuity if the employee was not on pension. So that's what has to be paid. So it also happens sometimes that when an employee is leaving an organization, could be leaving because of the contract has come to an end, for example. So when the contract has come to an end, the employer is not supposed to give a notice, but he is supposed to pay for the wages up to the date of the end of the contract. And for the leave days, there's only for paying of the leave days, assuming that there was an arrangement from the employer to ensure that the employee exhausts his leave days up to by the date of the end of the contract. But if there was no such kind of an arrangement, then the employer can pay the outstanding leave days. If gratuity was there, he's supposed to pay. For the pension, it will be also treated under as it is in the Pension Act. So it has to be transferred to the next employer, and also or even accessed after the 3 months. And also at the same time, it also happens sometimes maybe an employee is missing. There could be other scenarios where an employee can just go missing. So in such kind of an arrangement, also what is important to appreciate is that there is always need for the it has to be proved that an employee is missing. But maybe in the first month that you are seeing that the employee is missing, you might have to suspend him on the payroll. Eventually you might find him coming up, but if he doesn't come up, first month, second month, third month, you find that after 2 years, this when you can be able to process his payments. So for the payments for the working days outstanding, the working days that he had worked in the last month, you can be able to pay the pension and all that to the dependents. Gratuity you can pay to the dependents. It is assumed that he has died. So that's what the law provides, the Pension Act. So there's nothing we can do about it. It's a law that is there, and you can be process. Even if he comes back after 2 years, we can say no, that's what the law says. After 2 years, the one is confirmed to have died, some kind of but because even the family members are aware that the person is missing. Because if he's not missing, it means he's somewhere, but he's just mad that he's not coming to the office. Then you can do the disciplinary process. But if this person, even his relations, are even coming to work to say our relation is missing, so there's nothing you can do. You cannot do the disciplinary hearing because it's nowhere to be seen. So that's what it has to happen, and that's what is also very, very important for us to appreciate. And also there are certain moments whereby an employee can leave an organization through retrenchment or redundancy. For example, an organization could be going restructuring, and maybe some positions are not required within the organization, or maybe sometimes the organization is in economic troubles, so it has to shut down, for example. So the employees have to be retrenched, for example. So there's need for the employer to pay wages for the days worked. There's need for the leave days to be paid, the outstanding leave days. The notice pay has to be paid. The pension funds have to be transferred to the next employer, or even accessed after 3 months. This is the access of the after 3 months, just the employee's contribution and not in the employer contribution. Gratuity, if there is any, and even you're supposed to pay severance pay. So this severance pay is in light of the amendment that happened in 2011, and not the one that is in the schedule of the Employment Act of 2000, but the one that is in the amended schedule of 2011, because it was severance now is only applicable where there is retrenchment or redundancy, or in some cases where the court has determined that the employee has to be paid severance pay. So this is what we need to be able to appreciate, and also issues of repatriation. You have to also provide for repatriation to wherever he came from and all that. So what we need to appreciate, these are some of the things that are payable within the law, in terms of what is it that you need to pay as an employer to your employees whenever such kind of things have happened, whether there is death, whether there is retrenchment, whether the employee is missing, and even sometimes where you have decided to terminate the employee. So these are some of the benefits which are applicable to be paid within the law, and also maybe sometimes they are based on the terms and conditions of service of the organization. So I would like to thank you all. Keep on watching this YouTube channel, because we will always be discussing important issues pertaining to the HR, general management, and also other things. So thank you all for being here to watch this particular YouTube channel. Thank you so much.